this DIY you're going to need some red, green and white polymer clay. I just use Fimo because this is what I'm used to. You're also going to need a small sharp knife, a plastic tool, you'll see how I use this later, a rolling pin, and then a circular cutter. I just use a piping nozzle and I'm going to be using both the large and small circles from this later on. The green Fimo I bought wasn't quite the right colour that I wanted for my holly leaves, so I ended up mixing a tiny bit of red with quite a large amount of green just to make it a little bit darker for the holly leaves. So I'm starting off making the holly leaves. I'm doing all of this on the top of some baking parchment. This just stops it getting quite messy, because if you've worked with polymer clay before, you'll know that it can stain your fingers. So I'm just sandwiching this piece of polymer clay in between two pieces of parchment and then rolling this with the rolling pin so I don't stain my rolling pin. And I've done this to about 2 to 3 millimeters thick. So I'm just cutting a small rectangle the size that I want my holly leaves. So I'll start off with rectangles and then I'll cut the shape out of these. So they're about the size of my thumbnail, and then I'm just using this piping nozzle as a cutter to cut 2 little semicircles out the sides, and I'm just cutting each corner off with the larger circle. You can just play around with this, whatever cutter you've got, or you could cut it by hand. This doesn't quite look like a holly leaf just yet, so I'm just going to use my fingers to tweak it a little bit and make the leaves look a little bit more holly leaf shaped. Then I'm just using a sharp knife, and don't cut it like I did in my hand, but I'm just cutting a little line in for the leaf. Now I'm going to take my red Fimo. I'm just cutting a small piece of Fimo for each berry, making sure that they're the same size so they look consistent, and then I'm just rolling these in the palm of my hand. Now red polymer clay tends to stain more than others, so make sure you wash your hands regularly when you're making these. I tend to do all of my holly leaves in one batch, then wash my hands, and then do the berries in a batch, wash my hands again, and then each step I tend to do in batches so I don't cross-contaminate colours. So now I need to attach 2 holly leaves together. So I'm just flattening down one of the corners of the first holly leaf, overlapping the second holly leaf over the top, and then kind of smushing these together to join them. This small plastic tool comes in quite useful to kind of mould the clay together and you're working with a couple of pieces that you want to attach together. And then I'm just adding the berries on top of the bit where I attached the holly leaves together. Now I'm going to take my white clay. So I've just cut a cube that's probably about 2 centimetres by 2 centimetres, and then I'm carefully moulding this into more of a cylinder shape until you're left with pretty much a marshmallow size and shape. Now we're going to use the green and red polymer clay to make the details on the candy cane. I'm actually using the green colour that came in the packet for this one rather than the green I made for the holly leaves, just because this is a little bit more vibrant for the candy cane. So I'm just going to roll a very thin sausage shape out of both the green and the red clay. For the green, I'm rolling this a little bit thinner than the red clay, and you'll see why later. So I'll roll it to about 1 to 2 millimeters thick, and then onto the red I rolled about 2 to 3 millimeters thick, so a little bit thicker. And And then this is essentially what we're going to be making, which we're going to roll out later. So you want to cut a couple of pieces of red and just stick them either side of your marshmallow shape. And then when you're doing this, if you just want to trim off a little bit of the excess clay, just so it doesn't get in the way later. And then I'm cutting a second piece to put on the other side. Make sure you have a little bit of an overhang, but not too much. Then I'm cutting 2 pieces of green to go on each side, leaving a little bit of a gap in the middle, so when you roll it out thinner, it doesn't all merge into one. And then again with the 2 pieces of green clay on the other side. Now you've just got to roll this shape out into a really thin sausage shape. So just really carefully keep rolling it. I'm trying to be really careful here that I don't touch it too much because I don't want the red to smudge too much into the white. So I've got a candy cane here that I've already made, so I've got this for reference of how thick I want it. Before it gets to the thickness that you want it, whilst you're rolling it, just give the clay a little bit of a twist, like I'm doing here, so it starts to look like a candy cane. And then from here, continue rolling it out a little bit thinner again. And then as you're rolling it, you can just give it a bit more of a twist, and then roll and twist. Now when you've got it to the thickness that you want it, just trim off the end, and then taking my original clay piece as reference, just cut out your candy cane. So this is really easy, just mould it into a candy cane shape and then cut it to size. Now I tend to be able to make 3 to 4 small candy canes out of my marshmallow sized piece of clay, but this all depends on how thick and how large you want your candy canes. Now I'm just going to take my holly leaves and I'm going to place these on top where I want them on the candy cane, and then just really carefully push them into play. You don't need to push too hard, as when you bake this clay it tends to stick to itself. So if you just push it down a little bit when you bake it, it should be stuck down enough. I just use my small plastic tool just to push ever so slightly underneath the berries. Now I've done my candy canes, I'm going to put them in the oven. Use the temperature recommended on your clay, and there we go. As you can see, the holly leaves are stuck down perfectly without too much pressure, and they're hard as nails. Now to turn these into tree decorations, I just use the screw-in eyelets that you can find in your local DIY store. These are used sometimes for curtain hooks or in picture frame hanging kits, and I'm just going to screw this into the top of the candy cane. It's actually a little bit easier to screw these in when the clay is still quite warm out of the oven. It just prevents the tops cracking. And then I'm just using some jute twine for the actual hanger of these candy canes. So I'm going to cut a few pieces that are the same size, and then I'm going to tie these on the top of my candy canes. So there we go, all done. I'm actually selling some of these on my Etsy shop right now, so if you're interested in purchasing them rather than making them yourself, then I will link my Etsy shop below. So thanks for watching.